So what we're going to do now is actually talk about how our local folks, we're going to go through a model again, did some work to identify the targets in the ACA repeal and what their groups did in conjunction with others across the country to assess where they should spend their efforts to stop the repeal of the Affordable Care Act and protect the health care of millions of Americans. Okay, so let's bring the mics down for our two folks over here. And we're going to ask you to share some information with us about how you did your assessment and your power map. And I'm going to go over here and raise up our map. Okay, let's talk about it. So you said you went to your Massachusetts delegation and they are all in favor. Yay, the work is done. Healthcare is saved, right?
Not quite.
Okay, so what happened? What did you learn?
Well, so I think we decided pretty early on that this was not going to be uncommon. You know, we live in a state with a delegation that we happen to agree with a lot of the time. And so we wanted to develop Indivisible Somerville in particular, wanted to develop an ongoing relationship with other grassroots organizations in the areas that we actually wanted to influence. And that was sort of our our main vector on that problem.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Michelle, what did you learn when you started looking at Congress specifically? Let's talk about the Senate. When you started thinking about this power map, the people who were supportive of healthcare and your position and were fighting against the repeal of the ACA, where were some of the actors along this map?
They were all the way in the supportive column.
Who's they?
Our delegates.
Okay.
So our two senators, both Markey and Warren, were firmly for or against the repeal of ACA.
Yeah, so the Massachusetts delegation was all the way over here, very supportive of your position, wanted to keep healthcare, had a lot of power because in the Senate there's only 100 folks, but at the same time, that wasn't enough, right? Yeah. Let's talk about other people who may have been in a similar position to the Massachusetts delegation. What other actors were here in the US Senate during the repeal?
All the way on.
All the way supportive and with some power.
With some power. So certainly the constituents that voted in our delegation, we exercised some power over them, but obviously much less than they had themselves. Within the Senate yourself, within the Senate itself, you're asking?
We'll add organized folks in a minute.
Okay.
So who else, members of the Senate, were over here deeply supportive and had some power?
Members of the Senate who were, well, there was the opposition had about the same amount of power, because once you firmly state your position, your power decreases in the Senate. Yeah. So there were those, in either case, their power was lower.
So I'm going to put some people
Senate
on
members
here.
You're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'll say Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
He was over here, right?
Yeah, he could pull the bill.
He set the agenda. He put the bill in motion,
right.
Had a lot of power, and was completely opposed to your point of view.
Right.
And wanted to overturn the Affordable Care Act and get rid of healthcare for millions. So lots of power and completely opposed. And let's add some meat here. There were, I think, 47.
Oh, how many? Oh, yeah, there were 47 other senators. Well,
47 Democrats.
45. We thought
45?
there were roughly 10, 5 in either direction.
Okay. So there were 45 Democrats here, roughly.
Yeah, Democrats were all pretty firmly against the repeal.
So you had 45 Democrats here. You said you had about 2 Democrats who were here.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah. Maybe one. We can do this. We'll do 1D there and maybe 1D.
We got our math wrong, but that would make it.
And this was Manchin.
Whatever. Yeah. Manchin. Heidi.
From North Dakota?
Yeah. And then more importantly, there were the R's on the other side that we felt we could flip.
Yeah, so most of the Republican caucus was here.
Yeah.
Right. a lot of institutional power. They were lockstep with their leader. But then there were some interesting people here in the middle of the map. Who were they?
Susan Collins in Maine.
Yeah.
Key.
Who else?
Lisa Murkowski was a target. We thought we might be able to flip Rob Porter in Ohio. Portman, thank you, Portman.
Okay. Oregon, right?
And we had no idea, but John McCain apparently.
Yeah. Let's do McCain over here. Arizona. So, when you started to understand the dynamics, that you had almost all of the Democrats who were either leaning supportive or very supportive with very little power, and then you had the majority in the US Senate, at least from what we understood on the outset, very strongly opposed to your position with lots of power, these people became much more important to the campaign to protect healthcare reform. So what did your organization do? What did you guys do?
Well, at this point, we were into several rounds of the repeal of the ACA. So at this point, we were at the Senate bill, and Indivisible was a little bit more organized. So Indivisible National was able to set up something called the Hub Dialer. And what that enabled us to do was to contact people in those very swing states. And
So
yeah,
Maine,
so that would be in Maine and
Alaska,
Ohio and
or Oregon and Arizona?
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. And we could reach out to constituents there and say, hey, we know you're probably for the ACA or opposed to the AHCA. We know that because you're a registered Democrat. They went off the voting records. So what do you say if we patch you through to the Senate office and you can record your opposition to this bill to your state senator? And we had enormous success with that because a lot of people really did feel that way, but they had no idea how to actually make that phone call themselves. So we patched them through, their voices were recorded, and we felt that that was very influential in helping stop the bill go through.
Great. So you can see this kind of tool actually allows you to focus your resources and your strategy. So what these groups here in Massachusetts did, they realized that their camp was over here. Their delegation was here, needed no additional contacts. And in fact, I think, Sean, you said, you were taking time away from those staffers.
Right, yeah.
So where they focused their efforts instead, and where their strategy became really clear, they realized they had to pull these folks over and up. They had to take them off of their position on the map here and move them more supportive and increase their power if they wanted to kill the bill. So that's why you saw so many groups, and I put a picture of one of my friends, Dawn Russell, up here. She was one of the ADAPT protesters in Colorado who got arrested. All of the folks who started to focus their efforts in these key areas consolidated their efforts because they knew this was the strategic pathway to win. And what happened?
Well, they didn't pass it.
Woohoo! Yeah, this is what happens when we organize well.